Welcome to the Vector Garden. My toolbar is bigger than yours, and that's because a lot of plugins are installed. They are from Astute Graphics, and in some videos during recent months, I have already shown you some. Now this video is about texturing and about adding transparency to artwork. As you can see in this artwork, I have already applied it the way that you usually are doing that. Let's double click this, and this distressed look here is applied via an opacity mask. In the transparency panel, you can apply a vector artwork or a raster image as an opacity mask, and then you have this artwork here that is transparent. You see there it's now blue. So let's move that back. Applying an opacity mask that way requires a lot of steps, and for some things that you want to apply, it might be kind of a very tedious workflow. So let's get out of here and let's close this, and let's see how you can do that using the Astute Graphics plugins. And this is about these tools here. They belong to the plugin Texturino, and they are these tools, and there are also panels associated with it, and you can also download images that you can use as textures from the Astute Manager. So let's take a look at that first. I'm going to the Manager, and in there you've got these texture packs, and then you have all these packs that you can download. All of these contain a lot of images, which are PNGs, and of course you can also use your own images for that. So there's fur, and there are mezzo-tint images and paper textures that you can use as overlays. And it's also interesting that you have textiles here that you can use in your fashion drawings. And here we have stipple. All these things can be downloaded, and I have already downloaded some of these, so we can also take a look at how to use them. There are some other things I have used here, and we're going to take a look at that first. So if you want to have a shape that blends into the background, you can do it like I have done here. This is just a gradient applied to here. So if I go to the gradient tool, then you see I have applied a freeform gradient here, and that has the same color as the background, and therefore it looks like this is just melting into the background, if you wish. So that's one way to do that. You can of course also use an opacity mask and blend that, or you can apply a gradient into an opacity of 0, or you can just paint that. So let's use this tool here, the opacity brush tool, and once I click that, you see we've got the Astute body, and then we have the settings for this brush. So let's take a look at this cloud, and you see you can set up the size of the brush. So here's the size it has, and then you can set up the hardness. We're going to take a look at that. So now if I draw into that, then you see it's pretty hard. I'm going to undo that, and we can set it up like this, and then it's very soft like that. So we have a very soft edge here. I'm going to undo that as well. We can set up the opacity, but I want that at 100%, and then we can also add noise. So what I want to do is just paint around the edge, so this just runs into the background like that, and you see we've got a soft edge applied like that. We can also take that once more and maybe make less opacity and also make a larger size. That's probably too large, so just like this to get this softer. So that's what you can do. And then let's take a look at what happens here. So let's just go to the transparency panel, and you see you have essentially painted a mask onto this. So this has just happened in the back, but you have the easy way to just paint the mask. That's one part of this plugin. And let's take a look at the rest of it. So that is more for adding a texture like this. Let's see, I'm going to use that yellow shape over there. So let's just select that. And then we can take a look at this, and you see the texture panel opens. Now, first of all, let's take a look at how we can load these images. So I can just click here and locate them. So we've got the mezzo tint. Let's take a look at one of these. That is nice. I'm going to open it. It has been added to the library, and there we can manage them. So this is what I just added, and you can set it up. You can rename it here. You can set up a category so you find it easier, and you can also create new categories, for instance, for your clients that you have. You can set it up to be repeating, but then of course it needs to be created in a repeating fashion. And we can set up an initial blend. We're going to take a look at what that means later. So let's go to OK. And then we can go to the category. So this is mezzo tint. And here we only have this one, so that's OK. And once you have selected that, you can just click on the plus sign, and then we have added that and get this kind of on-screen display. Now here you've got an option that's the most important here. So this is auto cover. This one makes this image always cover that selected path. We can turn that off, and then we can also scale that. You see, and then of course the tiling matters. So then we can set it up so that it repeats or that it doesn't repeat, and also you can move it around. Let's make that larger. I'm going to make it larger again and see that it adjusts here. Like this. The next thing we can adjust is the blending mode, which is in this menu here. And you see currently it's set up to multiply. It's a black and white pattern, and all these other options might not do a lot, so screen changes a lot, but you have to check that out. Now the interesting one is the one at the bottom, which is knockout, and that one just punches through this. So let's take the selection tool, and if I now move this around, let's take a look at the layers panel, or rather let's move it here, and you see it's knocking out. So it's punching holes through that shape. Let's move it back. So that's essentially what most likely we want to do with it. If you want to get rid of it, then you can take it away here, because this one now, let's take a look at what we get. We're going to take a look at the appearance panel, and there you see we've got it added as a texture effect. You can turn it off here and turn it on again. And if you want to get rid of it, you can click here, because it's not in the transparency panel. So take a look at transparency, and you see it's not there. So it's in the object, it's an effect that we have added. There's another way to use this. So let's take a look at this example. This is an infographic, and maybe you want to add in some texture into this. So let's select this one here. And first of all, I need to add another kind of texture to that. So let's load that here. It has been added. There we have the grass texture, and multiply probably doesn't make a lot of sense for that, but let's just leave it. And now I have that shape selected. So the next thing is we need to select the texture. So let's go to recently used. That's not it. So let's go to all, and let's select the grass lawn, and let's just add it like this. And I want it to be tiled. So let's go to this one, make it smaller so that it tiles like that. And you see the size of the actual image of that actual texture is here in that gray rectangle, so it's smaller and now gets tiling. Then we have put it into the complete object, which is nice, and we can also select a different mode here, and we can also reduce the opacity and then maybe get a nicer result and combine that with a different blend mode. That could be a nice effect, but it's kind of boring. So maybe you just want to point out that texture in some areas of this shape. And in order to do that, we can now erase the texture from that shape in certain areas. And for that, we have the texture brush tool, which is down here. And there we can now just erase this. And this tool as well has some settings where you can change the size and the hardness and the opacity. Let's make the opacity more like 100%. And then we see the erasing a little better. So maybe here I want to get rid of it, and I just want to have it in some areas and not in others to have the details getting more pointed out and have this just like a hint of a texture. And of course, I can also go back to the texture tool and maybe set up the opacity again so that it gets more visible. And if you want to undo some of the masking you did, you can use that texture brush tool, hold down the Alt key and then paint over it again. And you see then it's visible again. So it's possible to paint in black and white if you wish. So like you would in Photoshop when painting a mask. And then we can just put some more interesting features into this infographic. So that's what you can do in order to work with textures in your artwork.